Nothing. Perfect. Okay, good to go. So we are doing, as I said before, I kind of went back after we did our two-part series on Shavuot, went back to doing Jewish women. So I wanted to do Devorah today because I think she's fascinating. I think it also does connect with like the kind of the timing of the year that we're in, and I'll explain why. And so we're gonna focus on Devorah today. But again, if any of you have a different topic that you want us to shift into as Torah Tea, then you can let me know. This is what I was inspired to go into today. All right. So hold on, just submitting. Oh, perfect. Okay. So hopefully you have your handout. I sent it out in an email, a woman's email last night. If you did not get that, then that means you're probably not on our women's list. And just let me know so that I can add you to that. But it looks like that. Herons of the Bible, and it says Devorah at the top. Okay. So Devorah is fascinating. She lived about 3,000 years ago, and she was a leader of the Jewish people from 2654 until her death in 2694. Okay, she was the fourth of the judges. So I'm going to give you like a little bit of background of where that comes in and how that works. But she was a judge. She was a prophetess. She was like a general, which is, you know, in war, which is like incredible. And she was like really at the epitome of like an incredible Jewish leader. And so we do want to have some background of like what's coming up over here and what's going on. And there are 9 songs called like shiras. Shira means song in Hebrew. There are 9 songs recorded in Tanakh, and Devorah is one of them. The Song of Devorah is a very famous song, right? So, so we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of the backdrop and the historical perspective behind where Devorah comes into our Jewish history. So we have like we came from Passover, we got to Shavuot, right, the holiday we just celebrated. So we have Moses leading the Jewish people out of Egypt. They're like one united whole group of people, stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, got the Torah. Moses was their leader throughout the 40 years in the desert. Moses dies right before they enter the land of Israel, and Yehoshua takes over. Yehoshua is the what's it called after, you know, not predecessor, whatever, the one after, the leader after Moses. Okay, and he is again like the single leader of the
successor.
Thank you. And after Yehoshua, then we go into this period called the Judges. So even in Tanakh, it goes like Yehoshua is like the book of Joshua, and then Shoftim, the book of Judges, and the Judges. And Shmuel is the author of Shoftim, the Judges. He like recorded this part of history. And so in the book of Judges, the story of Devorah takes up 31 verses, and 24 verses. The story of Devorah takes up 24 verses, and the song of Devorah takes up 31 verses, about halfway through the book. So it's actually very few words that we know about Devorah, but it's like, I would say it's like few words, big story, big lesson, which is one of the many things that I love about this, right? So we have like this short narrative of her, but so much to learn from this story and from this lesson. Okay. So we'll just start. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the background, but we'll just start with what was going on in her time, in the background and the history, when Devorah kind of came to be a leader. So if you look at text number 1, and so this is from Shoftim, from Judges, it says, in those days, there was, and sorry, hold on, Ann Molson is trying to get in. I just did admit her in, so hopefully she should be in. Are you here, Ann?
I'm in, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know why my picture's not there, but.
Yeah, your picture's not there, but we hear you and we see you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's enough then.
Okay, so it says in Shoftim, this is text number 1 on your handout, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was proper in his own eyes. Okay, so this is like the verse that's kind of really explaining what was going on in that time. So it was really a period of transition. So like I said to you before, we had Moses, who was a central leader, led them through the desert right before they entered the land of Israel. Then we have Joshua, central leader, and they crossed the Jordan and they conquered Israel. And really, and both Moses and Joshua were very inspiring and powerful and incredible leaders, and we know a lot about them. But with Joshua's death, and even already before his death, things started to change. Okay, and there's a verse that says, Yoshua had sent the people away, each man to his heritage, to possess the land. In other words, they got into Israel, they conquered the land, and then they divided it up, and it was like each tribe had their tribal section, right? So now what kind of happened, there was like this shift from being like one people under one leadership to like more of a tribal identity. It became much more like each family, each tribe to themselves, and less away from having this like being one unit and one as a whole. And it became kind of like the idea of every man for himself, so to speak. Instead of national identity, it was tribal identity. And they were focused on earning a livelihood and supporting their families and the ordinary challenges of day-to-day life. Remember, they're coming from the desert where their food was provided for them. So everything was like simple and easy for them, in that way, that they were able to focus on spirituality so much in the desert. And then they come into the land of Israel, and now it's like real life, so to speak, where they have to really like live and work the land and figure out stuff with their neighbors and all of that. So there was a big shift and a big transition without a single leader of the Jewish nation, very much like today, where we don't have like one, we have Jews spread out all over the world, and we're not like under one specific leader. So they did have their own individual courts, and in every town and city they had, obviously, like there's a commandment from the Torah to set up justice systems. They had that, but there wasn't, again, this one figure for them to look up to. And like we just read, in those days there was no king. Every man did what was proper in their eyes. And like, yes, there were leaders, but again, even the leaders had like more of a narrow vision and scope to what they thought maybe was possible for them, or what their role was. And what's interesting is, in a lot of what goes on or went on in this time, our sages actually kind of, I don't know if the word's blame, but attribute what was going on to the fact that the leaders weren't truly leading, right? So like the Yalkut Shimoni tells us that the members of the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish court of law, should have girded their loins with, I'm just quoting, you don't have it on your handout, loins with iron garters, lifted their robes above their knees, and traveled throughout the cities of Israel, teaching the people. They did not do this. Instead, when Israel entered their land, everyone ran to his own vineyard and olive grove, saying, "My soul is at peace," refraining from increasing in their exertion. So they were kind of like complacent, just like, here's my domain, here's what I take care of, and not kind of stepping up to the plate of central leadership. And then what happened as a result of this is that the people lapsed into this cycle. There was this terrible cycle that started happening, which we see all throughout the book of Judges and prophets and all of that, is that they would start taking on the ways of their Gentile neighbors and practice idolatry and start intermarrying. And then God would like kind of deliver them into the hands of their enemies and put them under some foreign reign from another king or another kingdom, and they would be oppressed. And then a leader would rise up, a judge or a prophet, who would really inspire them towards teshuvah, towards returning and recommitting to drop their idolatry and their evil ways and go back to the ways of Torah, and then things would be good for a while, and then cycle would repeat itself. So we have this continuous cycle of like good times and hard times and good leadership and oppression and all of that. So okay, so there was no, right, so that was the cycle, but at this point there's like no leadership, no feeling of unity or responsibility for each other as a nation. So that would be the background before we dive into Devorah, and that already gets us to practical application number 1. You want to read that for us, Harriet?
a very powerful lesson right at the beginning of our lesson. As soon as we lose our sense of unity and each begin doing whatever seems right in our own eyes, with little regard for the nation as a whole, when no leaders seem to be in sight, and we all seem to be creating those little ghettos to protect ourselves instead of reaching out, the results are never pretty.
Yeah. So that's already right away, we kind of get this lesson about what it means when we go from being a united whole to just everyone, kind of each man for themselves, or each person looking out for themselves. So, okay. So we spoke about this cycle that keeps going on, and how, right, and that then a judge would rise up, and there would be like a leader for a little bit, and that leader would help them, and then when that judge passed away, they would go back to their corrupt ways and go back to idolatry and intermarriage, and again, just like this very vicious cycle. And we see in some of the different verses that the sages really kind of place the blame upon the leaders for their backsliding, not really on the Jewish people as much as like, where were the leaders here? Where were the people that were going to rise up and, really lead so that this wouldn't keep happening, instead of like this idea every man did what was proper in his own eyes. Right? So like, who's going to help with this moral consciousness? And that kind of, brings up this interesting, the idea of live and let live. Is that a Jewish concept? What do you guys think? You could jump in. Let me know your thoughts. Live and let live. Do we believe that? Is it aligned with Torah values?
I don't think so. It seems like we're all our brother's keepers.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've learned, that's what I glean.
Yeah.
I don't think it's live and let live. I think it's live according to Torah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
we live in community. We don't live an ascetic lifestyle where we're just by ourselves and don't have to worry about anybody else. We need community.
Right.
Have a minion, to maintain a Jewish lifestyle. So no, I can't go along with that.
Yeah.
And I also, one more thing is, I think that in today's world right now, that the fact that those of us who want to wear masks are doing it for the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just us staying separate. We're doing both things. If we go out and we wear a mask, we're helping other people, and that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like we're all in agreement. Yeah, so there are many commandments in the Torah that require us to be aware and concerned about and invest in somebody else, right? It's never just about like, do your thing, do your own, live your own little life and live and let live, that concept. We have love your fellow as yourself is already even just like other people mattering. It's not just about you. Another mitzvah, you should surely rebuke your fellow man if he's doing something detrimental. Now, there's a lot of particulars about what that looks like, and that you have to have refined that part of yourself already, right? You just go around telling other people what to do, but clearly it's not just like let people do their thing and we just only worry about ourselves. And again, like what Barbara brought up, like, am I my brother's keeper, right? But like, yes, we are our brother's keepers in very many ways. And so live and let live could very easily lead to just ignoring other people or what they're going through, or taking any responsibility towards other people. And yes, it could be very, very comfortable to say, I'm just going to do my own thing. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to think about what's going on out there and all of that. But the Torah expects a lot more of us than that. And these are the times where we enter Devorah into this. Are there any Devorahs here, by the way? Diane, are you Devorah? Hold on. Diane. Oh no, you're Dina. Okay, Diane just is in the room, but I'm pretty sure Diane is Dina. All right, no Devorahs. Okay, so
May I ask a question?
Devorah into this time period. Hold on, someone else trying to enter. Except
I just want, Adina, I want to ask a question. How
Yeah.
does the words seem a little bit ambiguous in what we just read, where it says every man did what was proper in his own eyes, as opposed to, you know, as the Torah says, or in keeping with the commandments. It's like one person could say in his own eyes he did X, and somebody else could say, well, if that were me, I would have done Y. So I don't know if there's any commentary on that language that we just read in text 1.
Yeah, I would have to look it up more because I'm sure there's multiple commentaries on that. But from my understanding, it was actually in both regards that there was. I mean, in other words, yes, they did have courts, right? We said it wasn't just like it didn't mean like lawlessness in terms of them doing what's right in their own eyes, because they did have courts, they did have like specific judicial, you know, things set up. But it was more of like a general, like, if there's not one central leader or one, you know, or like people that are really like leading the way it was with Moses, then a lot of times people are just left to like, well, what do we think we should do here? What do we think, you know? And I mean, I think that a lot of times now, even like, you know, like, wouldn't it be nice if there was just like the Jewish response to this thing, like across the board, not like every, you know, individual leader saying their thing. And that's kind of like what it was like there. There were a lot of like people having to make, as I have another meeting, hold on. Let me just, I apologize for interrupting, but Adrienne is trying to get on. Let me just make sure she has the right Jewish Nevada.
Adina, it's probably me trying on the computer. Diane.
It's you trying on the computer?
Yeah, because I'm just on my cell phone. I can't get my computer to open.
Okay.
So I'll get out of here so I don't annoy you. I'll stay on the phone with you.
You're not annoying me. No, Adrienne. I'm typing to Adrienne.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, Adrienne said she's trying to get in and it says another meeting. So I just wanted to help her out with that and hope that that should help her. Not, okay, there she is. We're good. Okay, yay. Hopefully you made it in here, Adrienne. All right, so did that answer your question, Nancy? Somewhat, yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
More, I'm sure there's plenty of commentaries. It might be a mixture of like following Torah laws or just like their own, like, or even just like a little moral dispute in that moment. What do I do? It could be, you know, the general guidelines and standards of the community. I mean, there's a lot of things that can change, right, when you don't have central leadership. But it wasn't necessary. And also, right, then they were getting influenced by their neighbors and intermarrying and starting to practice idolatry and things like that. So that's also kind of connected to every man did what was right in their own eyes. I don't think, you know, like it became a little bit of like every man to himself, or every area, every tribe, that concept. Okay, so this takes us back to Devorah, right? So this is the setting and the background where Devorah kind of enters our scene here within the book of Shoftim, okay? So in this cyclical pattern that we discussed, there would always like arise, you know, there would arise another Jewish leader, and it was always a male. And here are the heroine of the story over here is really is Devorah. It wasn't another judge or I mean, it was a judge or prophet, but it was Devorah in this instance who really came to be. We're going to see what kind of leader she was. So this takes us to text number 2 about what's going on here. So let's see, Tessa, do you want to read that for us?
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. Text number 2. And the people of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud, judge at the time, was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Yabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose army was Sisera, who lived in Haroshet Hagoyim.
Thank you. So, right, so we're just kind of entering like where in the scene is it? The judge that had been leader of the Jewish people died. His name was Ehud. He died. And the Jews were back in a bad cycle, and so God just sold them. Like he allowed Yavin, the king of Canaan, to kind of reign over them. He reigned in Hazor, and he had a large army, and the captain of the army was named Sisera. right? So we're back into this pattern, and who is the next leader that arises? Not a he, but a she, the heroine, and we are speaking of Devorah, who is extremely unique, not just because she was female, but this is how we are introduced to her in text number 3 in the book of Judges, verse 4 of chapter 4, right there. So do you want to read that for us, Nancy?
A prophetess, a woman, a Lapodet, who
Mhm.
judged Israel at that time. In the above text, 3 descriptions are attributed to Devorah. 1, prophetess. 2, the woman of Lapodet, and 3, judged Israel at the time. These facts, that Devorah was a prophetess, 2 was from Lapodet, and 3, a judge, are very significant.
Thank you. Yeah. So first of all, let's go with prophetess. What does it mean to be a prophetess? Okay, so a prophetess is very, very unique. When describing the the virtues that are necessary in order to even be granted the gift of prophecy. This is a quote from the Rambam, who who quoted Maimonides, who codified the whole Torah. And in there, in the laws of the foundations in Torah, the Rambam writes, you don't have this on your handout, I'll just quote it for you. Prophecy is bestowed only upon a very wise sage of a strong character, who is never overcome by his natural inclinations in any regard. Instead, with his mind, he overcomes his natural inclinations at all times. He must also possess a broad and correct mental outlook. So yes, there were times, from time to time, God did communicate with people that did not have all of these virtues, but really to be termed a prophet or a prophetess, you clearly were already at a much higher level. And many of the judges, most of the judges were not prophets. They were judges, 2 different things. But Devorah was both a judge and a prophetess. And what's interesting, again, like the judges, they weren't necessarily known for a very high spiritual level. They were leaders. They had to judge the people and lead them in a certain way, but it didn't mean, being a prophet or a prophetess has much more to do with your spiritual achievements and your spiritual advancement. So throughout the book of Judges, we see examples of a lot of leaders that had courage and faith and strength and all of those things, a lot of trust in God, a lot of amazing qualities, but not necessarily being a spiritual giant. And Devorah had both. Okay, so she, her prophecy was extremely unique. She authored, again, like I said, a song, one of the 9 songs that are recorded in Tanakh. And our rabbis tell about her that the prophetic, every time she had like prophetic spirit, every time she had a prophecy, her face would shine with godly light, like Moses did when he received prophecy. So we're already seeing, like, there were many references to like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moses, right, who was the greatest prophet who ever lived. So clearly, this is Devorah was of a very high spiritual stature. And then, so that was one. Then we have also Devorah the judge, right? There's 2 types of judges. There's a Dayan, which is more of a litigation, right? Like in court, that kind of judge. And then there's a Shofet, which is more of mediation, a mediation kind of judge. And there was a commandment from the Torah, right? That you should have your own court system set up. So every place had its own court, and that consisted of 23 judges, Dayanim, like the kind of litigation judges, that if there was a case, what do we do in this scenario? You go to the local court. That's not who Devorah was. She was a judge of the people, meaning they appointed her. It wasn't like the judges that appoint them however they're appointed, right? Like the ruling body, like here's the Jewish court system. It's the people said, we want you to judge us. Yes, Harriet.
I just want, going back to the fact on that one place that said the Lord sold them in the hand of Yabin. I wanted you to say something about sold them, but I always was taught that she wasn't a prophet like somebody who gets mysticism and pretends to tell you what the future is. She was more of telling them how to behave
Yeah.
in the now as
Right.
behavior.
So, or that could also be that this was, oh, there you go. I see your question in the chat box now too. That could also, right, there's the judging part, which would be more the behavior, and then the prophetess part that could be like actual prophecies revealed to her from God that she would reveal them to the Jewish people. But when you about sold them, I think that it's, I have to look up the exact Hebrew word there, but it's kind of like the idea of like delivering them into, like I'm giving them over into this reign, right? Like I'm allowing this king to now be their oppressor, essentially, right? So again, we know that everything like only happens with God's hand anyways, but here it's almost like writing it out for us. It's like now God, right? Like the difference between God handed them over to Yavin, the king, or sold them over to Yavin, like here, like do, versus like us not saying, oh, God did this, but like look what happened now. The Plishtim came and destroyed the camp, right? Of course, it still happens with the hand of God. So here we just see in Shoftim, we see this cyclical pattern over and over, like in the verses of like what's going on. Okay, so we were saying that Devorah, she wasn't a member of like these courts, like the 23, courts in every local court. So how is it that she could judge the people? It's that, but the people really highly respected Devorah so much, and they wanted to be judged by Devorah. So they accepted her on their own. And actually, in the Talmud tells us, the Tosfot makes the point here that Devorah's insightfulness was recognized as divine in nature, and the people accepted her. It says because of the Shekhinah, because of her divine presence. So clearly, they like held her in such high esteem, and they already saw how incredible she was that they're like, we want her to guide us. So very different, obviously, than when a leader imposes their authority on people. This was the people made her the leader, and that gets us to practical application number 2. Which is, I think, another powerful example of true leadership. Andrea, do you want to read that for us? We're unmuted, but we can't hear you. All right. Robin, do you want to read that for us?
Me, sure. Number 2. A true leader doesn't impose oneself on others. That is called exploitation. A true leader is someone who inspires others to be themselves. There are leaders who drown out all of the sounds, even cries for help, so long as their own preachy voice rings loud and clear. Then there are true leaders who can barely whisper softly or say nothing at all and motivate you to find your own voice. Devorah was such a person, and she paved the path for us to emulate her.
Thank you. Robin, we're in Israel now. You're still in the desert.
Oh no, that's actually Death Valley.
Oh. Okay. So, okay, and then so we spoke about Devorah as a prophetess, Devorah as a judge, and then we have that third description. What was that referring to? It says Devorah of Lapidot. So the simple meaning of the term in text 3 is actually, it says that she was Eshet Lapidot. She is the wife of Lapidot. So her husband was named Lapidot. So who is this person? Who is Lapidot? And so this is her husband. And realizing, like, why was he called Lapidot? Who is he? Realizing he had a lot of potential. The story sounds very similar to a little bit of the dynamic between Rachel and Rabbi Akiva. Remember, we spoke about that marriage and how all that came about. So he was a very simple man. Devorah met him, and she saw his potential, and she really wanted to motivate him to a higher purpose. She was a very wise woman, and so she didn't nudge him. She didn't pester him to kind of reach his potential. She didn't make any demands. Instead, she decided, how am I going to get him involved in a spiritual environment? How do I get him to spend time around holy people and wise people and devout people and all of that? Because she believed that would really help his growth and really help him reach his own potential. So what she did is she would weave wicks multi-stranded wicks to use in the sanctuary, the Mishkan, which was in Shiloh at the time. And she would ask her husband to bring them. So she would like make a donation towards the tabernacle, the sanctuary. And she would ask her husband to bring these wicks to the temple. And then the people that worked there would become very familiar with him, and then obviously he would be hanging around in a very holy and special environment. And they nicknamed him Lapido because Lapido means burning flames. So it's right from the wicks that he would donate because of Devorah. That's where the name Lapido came from. And the idea is that his own inner flame, his own inner burning, was ignited, so to speak. So a very similar, no problem, Andrea. Yes, I think that this class is very apropos about leadership and about caring about others. Yes, I do think it's very apropos. Okay, so we see again that, and I just, like when I was learning about Devorah, I just felt again like this very similar idea of like Rachel, like in her own wisdom, like how do I see the potential, you know, she saw the potential in Rabbi Akiva, and then how do I actualize that? How do I bring it out? And it was like both of them did it in such soft ways and like ingenuous, I would say, like, you know, like really thinking without hurting their own, you know, their own ego or being nudgy or pestery or like, here's what I need you to do, here's what I want you to do. They both were like very wise in how they really brought out the potential that they saw in their husband. So I think that's also just like a really special quality that they both share, and obviously a quality that we are endowed with as women. So, you know, you could think that if she just wanted her husband to be successful, she could have just, you know, had him in like, or be in that environment. She could have just said like, go offer sacrifices or something like that, or go make donations, or, you know, here, I made a vessel for the temple. Like there's so many other ways or things that she could have contributed. But the fact that she like chose to make wicks, to like weave her own wicks, and the fact that, you know, that similarity of like of the idea of like, I'm going to ignite his own neshama, his own flame inside of him, and by giving wicks, right, that connection there I think is really powerful, as well as I'm going to give something that gives benefit to others. I'm going to give wicks, which are going to have light, and light benefits other people. So it's like not just thinking, what can I give, but what can I give that will benefit somebody else, right? So it, even just her donation showed her own responsibility that she already felt towards other people, that she was all about helping other people, which we see so much in the way that she led and the choices she made as leader of the Jewish people. So that gets us to practical application number 3. Let's see, Barbara, do you want to read that for us?
Okay. Act in ways that aren't just holy. Act in ways that inspire others to be holy as well. To not only make sacrifices, also make candles.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Other sages interpret Eshet Lapidot as a description of Devorah's character. She was a burning torch, a fiery woman who radiated energy, purpose, and a sense of mission. She sought to ignite others and motivate them to action. She began to work in ever-expanding circles of influence in her own home, later in the communities in which she worked and did business, and finally within the Jewish people as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. And that actually brings us right away into practical application number 4. Let's see, Sandy, do you want to read that for us? You are muted. You would have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted. Do you see that? Page 2, practical application number 4. Huh, we still can't hear you. Let's see. Anne, do you want to jump in and read that for us?
Sure. One moment. Practical application number 4. Be fiery. The unique quality of a candle is that it can easily illuminate other candles at no loss to itself. Ignition is contagious, and the flame only grows, never diminishes.
Thank you. Yeah, so all the, and we know in general, right, that candles are just so deeply connected to the Jewish woman. We have the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbat candles and the holiday candles, and the analogies of candles and what the flame represents and the wick and the candle and our soul and all of that is just, it's endless. So candles are really very significant. And here we have Devorah creating the wicks to donate to the temple so that her husband could be around a holy environment and reach his own potential that way. Okay, so now we're going to get to the palm tree of Devorah. Very famous. This is text number 4. I'll read that for you. And she would sit under the palm tree of Devorah between Ramah and Beit El on Mount Ephraim, and the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. So it's very interesting that like this palm tree is mentioned, and it's a very iconic. I think that it became like a source of inspiration for Jewish women. So Devorah owned an entire like orchard or grove of date trees. And my mom's on here, right? My mom's name Tamar means date palm. And so Devorah owned an entire grove of them. And so number one, it was a huge source of income because dates are, I guess, pricey, right? They're like a delicacy. And it was a huge source of income, which the beauty of that was Devorah was independently wealthy. She was also a great business owner. We'll add that to her resume. So she was independently wealthy, which was beautiful because then she was able to judge completely, like there was no chance that she was going to take bribes or that she's going to be persuaded in a certain direction or anything like that, because money was not at all a motivator or anything in her judgment. So that was like another beautiful thing about Devorah. But besides for the fact that the date trees and the orchard helped her in a financial sense, she would use these big palm tree, like she would sit under the shade of this big palm tree, and people would come to her and be judged under the shade of the palm tree. So on the one hand, their palm trees have like big leaves, and there was a lot of shade, and it afforded privacy from other people, the shade and the privacy. But she was able to be very careful about Jewish laws of modesty, which would be like in here, the mitzvah of yichud, which is that a woman is not alone with a man that they're not related to, like in a secluded place, right? So you wouldn't be in a locked room together alone. If you're having a meeting, you wouldn't close the door and knowing that no one could come. You would, right? There's a whole, the mitzvah is the mitzvah of yichud, and then there's a whole bunch of particulars about that and what that would look like. So in order to be really careful with this mitzvah, Devorah would meet with people outside under the shade of a palm tree. And she was able to be very careful about this area of modesty, and at the same time have shade and still have some measure of privacy from other people. So does anyone else come to mind for you? Someone who was able to have like a really public and influential role, but at the same time kept to the highest standards of modesty?
Miriam,
yeah. Definitely.
What about Moses? I mean, he was the most humble of men and didn't flaunt it, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking when I said that, when I asked it, I was thinking more like women. Because, right, but you're right. Like it's a trait that could be for anyone. I was thinking like, because sometimes in our own heads, we kind of put together, being out there and having an influential role and like, as sort of that, then it's so much easier to compromise our own, privateness and our own privacy and our own modesty. And so to be able to really combine the two is really incredible. Okay, Naomi asked, what kind of matters did Devorah judge? It's a good question, but I would assume anything that people have questions about. I don't know, like you come to your leader when you're like, what do I do in this scenario? What do you think I should do here? And again, not like, I don't think so much like litigation, right? Not like my neighbor stole this thing and, you know, do whatever. Maybe not so much that as more of like counsel and mediation, right? We said the shofet is more like, you know, how do I make peace in this family dispute? And everyone's, you know, things like that. I think on a more about like a personal level, personal guidance. Okay, Naomi said, as an example of a woman, the Rebbe's wife, Chaim was Krishnirson. So the reason, yes and no. Yes, 100. Well, yes and no. Yes, 100%. She had a very influential role. She was very not public. She was actually extremely private. Many people lived in New York and never saw the Rebbetzin, right? People who lived in Crown Heights. So she wasn't like here. Devorah was like a leader in the sense of like, I'm meeting people and I'm out there and I'm a judge and a prophetess and a general and a business owner and sitting under palm trees, right? Very, very different. The Rebbetzin was extremely private, but 100% extremely influential behind the scenes. And 100% the highest level of Torah standards of modesty.
I thought of another judge, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a judge. Absolutely.
Also, she's kept kosher. She was a very modest woman, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Aren't you really talking about a counselor rather than somebody who is involved in a litigation perspective, which is Ginsburg is more from a litigation perspective, whereas I think what you're saying here is somebody who counsels people, which is a different kind of a role, is what I'm understanding you to say.
But my question was just like, in general, which women can you think of that were both, you know, influential and out there, so to speak, but also maintained really high levels of Torah modesty?
I think she was asking about my first question.
Oh, did I misunderstand that?
What kind of matters did she judge? I was thinking as you were explaining it that she sounded like a mashpia.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was kind of vast what she would cover, but yes, definitely like a mashpia figure.
So who was judging the disputes between neighbors that somebody stole somebody's cow or stuff?
Courts. They still have local courts of like 23 judges, but these weren't leaders. These were like lawyers, you know, judges and lawyers or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So back to this era and what's going on over here. So, and I just want to give everyone a little heads up that I have to end early today because my first grader is having a Chumash party and at 2 o'clock, and he's receiving his own first Chumash, and we're having a whole celebration. So I am going to end like 5 minutes before 2, and if we don't get through this, which I assume we won't, we will continue next week. Okay. So, so life was clearly not very, it still was, it wasn't like life was all peaceful and wonderful over here, right? We spoke about already how the king of Canaan, Yavin, was like their enemy, so to speak, and oppressing them. And then he had a very accomplished military leader, Sisera. And in text number 5, we hear a little bit more about Sisera and what he had. He says Sisera had 900 chariots of iron. In 20 years, he sorely oppressed the people of Israel. So clearly, this was not a idyllic period of time for the Jewish people at all. It was like really, and then actually the commentaries tell us like, what does it mean he sorely oppressed the people? Which, interesting, it was not physical suffering. It was not taxation, or it wasn't physical oppression. They did do some of that, but it was shattering their morale. It was taunting them and teasing them and using words to really put them down and mocking them for their weaknesses and all of that. And that was like really the oppression that was going on. And who would stand up for them is Devorah. She would fight words with words. She used their weapon to fight back, which is speech. And what's fascinating is the name Devorah. The root of the name Devorah is the letters Daled Bet Resh, Deber, right? Which is the same Dibor and is speech. So the Devorah also is the same root as speech. She was gifted with the ability to lead using the power of speech. And we know that speech is a gift and it's a power. and that our words can wield tremendous power, how we use them. And so she used her gift of speech and being a good orator to reassure the people and to lift their morale when they were put down, and to kind of, but then also to bolster their spirit and their faith and their trust, but also to like answer back to the kind of taunts and jeering and mocking and whatever that the Jewish people were exposed to. So that's another incredible thing about Devorah. And again, clearly, if she was speech, and if she was a great orator, that goes along with being a prophetess, right? Because prophecy also has to do with the gift and the power of speech and giving it over. And the word like navi, which is the Hebrew word for prophet, also the root of that is niv, which also means speech. So navi and Devorah, they both have roots of speech, because the navi, really their job was to speak to the Jewish people and to lift them up and to give them counsel and to relay God's message and all of that. So that was Devorah's role. Okay, so Devorah, if we kind of get more of a picture of her and who she is and what she was like and all of that, she had material wealth and success, right? She had a husband who she inspired to spiritual growth. She had a position of respect and honor within the community. She was on a very high spiritual stature in her relationship with God. And still, she was not just like, okay, now I'm going to sit back and look at all the wonderful areas of my life and everywhere that I'm good. She really was like, what do I need to do for my people, right? She really looked at the Jewish people as like, I'm their leader, they're my people, and what do they need right now? And they were ruled by this terrible king, this Canaanite king. They were ruled by him, they were being mocked by him, and to her, it wasn't just like, let me allow this, let me just be the best leader I can be under these circumstances. It was like, I need to put an end to this. That was truly Devorah. So I think that's also just like really powerful, right? To think of like when someone has already like so much going for them, then it's so easy to be like, like life is good, or my life is good, or I have all this going for me. And for Devorah, it was like, no, my people need help. And so she always was improving herself and improving the lives of the people around her, and thinking like, how can I better inspire them? How can I help them grow? What can I do to benefit my people? So now she decided to undertake an even greater mission, and she decided it was time to free the Jewish people from Canaanite oppression. And this is where her general status comes in, where she decides to go to war. So, okay, so other times when the Jewish people were oppressed by other nations, what would they do? They would turn to God, they would cry out in prayer, right? They would, and then God would give them like another savior, another person that would rise up and really help them do that. And what's amazing in Devorah's song that's recorded in Navi, in her song, she says, I, Devorah, arose. I arose, mother in Israel. That's a quote from her song. So in other words, she was not raised up, she arose on her own initiative. She wasn't appointed. She wasn't like told you have to do this. This wasn't even a prophecy where God, said, here's your next mission or your next job. This was her saying, I arose, right? And yes, 100% she had divine help and success from above, because you can't be successful without God's blessing from above. But it was in response to her effort that she took the initiative. She was not looking to be a warrior or to get any accolades or to be a general, right? It wasn't like, let me, this sounds really appealing and exciting. It was none of that. It was just like, I see a need, I'm stepping into this role. I see my people being oppressed. I'm no longer okay with this oppression. I'm just gonna step up to the plate over here. Okay, we'll do practical application number 5, and then we're going to end for today, and we'll finish next week on Devorah along with somebody else. So let's do practical application number 5. Let's see. Anne Molson, do you want to read that for us?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so practical application number 5. Our growth and accomplishment, who we are and what we can be, is a miraculous blessing from above. But we should never be satisfied. We should raise ourselves up, for our effort and initiative inspires a heavenly response of even greater proportions.
Thank you. All right. So I'm excited to finish Devorah because I think that she's incredible. And I'm going to end here for today because I do have a Chumash party to attend, but I will be back here next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we will finish Devorah, and I'll also send out a handout for another one, so that we have time to do more. And if any of you guys again would like to, reach out with a specific topic that you're fascinated in learning, then you can do that as well. I'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was great. Really